think you own whatever land you land on. The earth is just a dead thing you can claim. But I know every rock and tree and creature has a life, has a spirit, has a name. You think the only people who are people are the people who look and think like you. But if you walk the footsteps of a stranger, you'll learn things you never knew, you never knew. Have you ever heard the wolf cry to the blue corn moon, or ask the grinning bobcat why he grinned? Can you sing with all the voices of the mountain? Can you paint with all the colors of the wind? Can you paint with all the colors of the wind?
Hello and welcome to another episode of ERG PowerTalk. I'm your host, Joe Santana. That clip you just heard is from the 1995 Disney animated feature Pocahontas, where Pocahontas challenges John Smith's cultural biases in a song titled Colors of the Wind. In today's increasingly diverse, globalized, and interconnected world, cross-cultural understanding has become a critical factor in workplace success. It's also an important factor in your ERG success, since you will not change a company's culture or grow more support and inclusion for your community if you only communicate with other people who look and think like you. Your community, just like your company, needs to master the skills of cross-cultural understanding and communication. So how do you acquire cross-cultural understanding, and how do you put those new skills to work in your group and in your career? That's the focus of our discussion today, and to help us answer those and other critical questions, we've got the perfect guest. But before we introduce our guests, let's take a moment to review our mission and acknowledge our sponsors. This is ERG PowerTalk, and I'm your host, Joe Santana. The purpose of ERG PowerTalk is to provide a virtual forum for the exchange of great ideas and inspiration for ERG leaders, as well as others interested in supporting ERGs. No more waiting until the next conference and praying that you get the budget to travel to the conference in order to find great ideas and stimulation towards action. Just subscribe and listen at your convenience. Before we begin, a quick note of thanks to our supporters and sponsors. UL Solutions, CVS Health, Dollar General, Trader Health and Wisconsin Medical College, Hiscox, Mass Mutual, McCormick, Tapestry, Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, MIT Lincoln Laboratory, Elastic, Oshkosh Corporation, Peace Health, Pitney Bowes, Daimler Trucks North America, and Sony Pictures Entertainment. Now, let's go straight to the program. He is a coach and manager with decades of experience as a cross-cultural intelligence coach who specializes in helping international organizations and businesses to improve communications and cooperation among staff for better individual and team performance. He coaches managers and leaders working in cross-cultural contexts to build trust, communicate effectively, and deliver results. As a senior manager in an international relief and development organization, he's worked with people in over 30 countries over his 2 decades-long career.
Good morning, everybody who's listening. Thank you for having me on the show. And yes, my name is Lui Lui. As you might have guessed, I am Chinese, or I like to call myself made in China. I started my international or cross-cultural working career in a university in China, where we received international students from all over the world, teaching them Chinese. So I was on the management side. That's where I met my wife as well, who's coming from England at the time. And then we moved and lived in Thailand for a year, and then came to England. My story carries on working cross-culturally as an immigrant or first-generation immigrant. whatever I had back in China as a manager in the university, I have to start from scratch. So I joined this organization I've been working in now from the mail room, if you like, or post room in England, it's called. So yeah, cut the long story short, I worked my way up all the way from the mail room to a level 2 senior manager in the organization. So we work in 50 countries and in all the 6 regions, and they'll have employees of about 1,000 across the globe. So yeah, it is a long learning journey. And I'm passionate about, because of my cross-cultural marriage, I'm learning every day, and also my career and work. So I'm passionate about sharing my learning with the managers or managers to be, or anybody who's working in this cross-cultural context, so that you don't have to learn it the hard way, if you like. So yeah, thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you for joining us today on ERG PowerTalk, Lulu. You started talking a little bit about your journey and what you've done and how you've navigated through this entire maze and learned these different experiences. My question to you is, what inspired you to become a cross-cultural intelligence coach? What made you say, this is what I want to do, let me pick this? A lot of people travel, they go to different places, they come from different countries. They don't necessarily pick that. Why did you pick that?
I think for me, it is so real. So to some degree, it's a challenge. So when we got married, you would know, for those who are married, you have the man and woman difference. So that's one level of challenge. And then on top of that, we have the challenge of cross-cultural marriage. So that's, if you like, the starting point. And also I had a taster of working in its university, working with different students coming to learn. And yeah, it is quite eye-opening. And I was just fascinated by how people from different country, different culture view things differently and behave differently. So, and then coming to England, I had to learn very fast to say it's a do or die situation. So you either make it through this system, or if you want to bark against it, then you will die. So I choose the do, meaning, so I used those previous experience working cross-culturally. I continue to learn to see how I actually adapt to a new environment, a new culture. That's one layer, working in England. And then very soon, I was working with people across the globe of different culture. And then as a person, I'm a learner. So then I reflect a lot as well. I don't just go through life just saying, oh, this is what it is. On the ongoing basis, I learn, I reflect, and then kind of gradually distill my knowledge and experience. And then by the time I reached the current level, my boss actually recently, just before COVID hit, and asked me this question, but how did you do that? Because you deliver results, the other seems to be struggling. And then that actually forced me to think, all those years of learning, which I probably all have it in my head, so I can actually put it down into something external to help others as well. So I have been coaching staff in a more casual way over the years, but this time around, it's forced me to actually put it in more of a structured way to come up with a coaching program so that other people can benefit as well.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you think people face today when working in a cross-cultural context?
First thing first is this is the elephant in the room. So as a manager, when you go through the career ladder, you will receive quite a package of training, if you like, financial management, time management, the managing team, conflicts, so on and so forth, name it, you have it. But so far, I don't think people actually have done or given any cross-cultural management training. On the other hand, with the way how companies and the organizations operate these days, before you know it, the managers are put into a situation, actually, you are managing a cross-cultural team. So a few scenarios here. So you are either based in your home country, you are given a team who are from different countries, different cultural background, and then when they put together to work under one project or under one initiative, you soon realize something's going wrong, but I don't know what it is. So I apply all the management tools and it's just not working, but I don't know what it is. Another scenario is you are dispatched or sent to another country by your company, organization to work there. The task is there, the target is there, you are asked to deliver. So then you are operating a different culture, different country. Again, you have to navigate through the system, but without very adequate training, if you like. So these are some of the challenges. Even then the most lethal combination is you are asked to work in a different country as well as leading a cross-cultural team, because many companies operate like that now. So you have office or factory in another country, but then a team is recruited globally. So that's most lethal combination. So you're in a situation as a manager, but then on this side, your boss is breathing down your neck, saying, where are the results? On the other side, the team just not working together. It's not they are bad people, but you don't know why. So this is why, because the cross-cultural intelligence is not there. You don't know how to navigate through those situation.
Those are challenges that I've heard a lot of people express, especially today. Years ago, the people that might experience that were a handful of people who, as you said, went to another country or came here from another country to work with a team that was local. But today, you got people at all levels working with cross-cultural teams, just sitting on calls on Zoom or Teams and so forth. So you've got a lot more than that. And with the increase in diversity across different countries, you've got different people who come in who have different value systems, different ways of thinking and so forth that are all part of your team. And what's really challenging there is that sometimes we assume that because someone else, let's say, for example, is an American, that we all share whatever that means in terms of culture, values, and so forth. But not necessarily, because depending on where that person's family came from, the experiences they had in life, even what part of the country they grew up in, they may have a totally different set of values, a totally different culture that they come from that basically makes them not see things the same way as maybe a manager or a coworker or a team member and so forth. So in your work, how do you help people in organizations, leaders and team members to resolve those types of challenges?
Yeah, you touched on a very important point there. So the cross-cultural issue is not just between countries, but it also exists within one country, like you said, regional diverse. So the different regions, different in the US case, different states would have very different cultures, if you like. So that also apply. Just want to clarify the concept first. When you talk about cross-cultural intelligence, sometimes people think it's just a communication issue. It's more than that. I think the cross-cultural concept, it means twofold. The first is how you and me understand our own culture, how we behave, why we behave the way we do. So what kind of culture we have. So that's the first fold. And the second fold is how you see others, see how you understand or want to understand the other cultures behave and function. So that forms the package of the cross-cultural intelligence, if you like. And the communication is one important component in that, but it's not all. So the intelligence covers the moment from you get up to the time you go to bed. So in the management setting, if you take the management project cycle, for example, from the moment you're given a task, meet your team, how do you build trust, and then all the way to managing dividing the goals, dividing the tasks, coordinate time and money, and how to resolve problems, managing conflicts, and managing the age and the gender dynamic within a team. They all have the cultural aspect to it. So, give you an example. You said, "How do I manage that? How do I help people?" When I was first given a task to go to manage the portfolio project in Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, on my first trip to Cambodia, and there are two types of organizations, what we call partner organizations we work with. One is expat-led. So they are Americans and some Dutch people. And then you have your local Cambodian-led organization. How do you build trust with these two groups in entirely different organizations? So you can't have it one size fits all. So how I do it and how I tell people to do it is actually for these so-called task-oriented countries, task-oriented cultures, broadly speaking, European. And then you have this relationship-based cultures like Asian, African, Latin American. For the task-oriented countries, how you build trust is you build trust based on your performance, your credential, your credibility. So I walked into Cambodia, and this expat group met me in the office. They basically more or less gave me a second interview to say, what qualifies you to come here to work with us? So ask all the technical questions. So that's how they build trust. Then after they're satisfied, okay, this guy got something, he knows his job. So then we started chatting, talking about family and all that. And with the Cambodian guys, entirely the opposite. So we don't talk about work at all. We start with, I invited them over in the hotel. We drink tea, had a meal, and talk about family, your journey in the organization, and to build the trust at a personal level. And then once they felt comfortable, they open up, and then we can start talking about work. So you can see this is an entirely different approach. If you go to the other way, the wrong way around, if you like, then they could have disastrous consequences.
And that's true of cultures all around the world. What you were talking about Cambodia, I used to work for a German company, and I remember we had a program designed specifically for German-American relations. And they talked about how Americans basically created their relationships very rapidly by being outgoing and showing friendliness and openness. But to the Germans, that seemed phony because they felt like, well, you don't know me. How can you feel so friendly and warm toward me without knowing me? But on the other hand, Americans thought that the Germans came across cold. But the reality of it was that they wanted to know you before they actually elevated the level or closeness of the relationship. Once they knew you, they would elevate the relationship into a closer, more trusting relationship. So those distinctions exist all over countries, continents, and even subgroups, the groups that make up different countries. So how can employees who literally work in these cross-cultural organizations, they are cross-cultural by nature because of the diversity of people, how can they take steps to prepare themselves to be more effective in those environments? What would you advise that they do? And for our listeners who are employee resource group leaders, how can they prepare themselves to not only do that for themselves, but perhaps also help some of their group members to become more effective in overcoming some of the barriers and challenges that are part and parcel of when you're dealing with people who just have a different way of looking at the world?
When it comes to culture or cross-culture, the first thing first is there is a cultural bias in all of us. So we tend to think our culture is the best culture and the right culture. So I think then whether it's very overt or not overt, it's there. So in order to work effectively in a cross-cultural context, we need to first challenge our bias to say actually there will be other ways of doing things. So it's to find out first is what are the other ways of doing things, not to compare in a way that you want to figure out which one is better, which one is worse, because that will lead you down the wrong path, further bias, if you like. Is to genuinely take interest to say actually what is the reason behind them doing things differently. And then the second is actually to see how you can work with those people in an open-mannered fashion to come up with a compromise, if you like, and name the issue. It's quite important as well to say actually, look, like the example you mentioned, working with the German colleagues, say, look, you walk into the room, say, look, we know we come from different culture. There has to be ways of working differently, but we want to recognize that, but we want to aim for good cooperation rather than assume until the problem erupts. So I think naming it at the beginning can be quite effective to say, to make people be aware there's a difference there. And then it's to really constantly seeking a solution with the other party and be open about it, to take a genuine interest to learn about it. Whenever people mention about German workers and German colleagues, their punctuality on time is quite famous. But then if you put, say, a German organization working with Asian or African colleague, at that time, the clashing point on time management can be explosive. Can you imagine the German timeline? So meet the African timeline. So, for example, I do a lot of training across those countries. So when the worst case scenario, my workshop started at 9, and people kind of turned up at 11. So I have to make a point to say, look, tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock is not the time you leave your house. It's the time you actually arrive here. So to make it explicit. But you need to understand the reason behind that is the German or European view on time is very linear, is one after another, while the Asian African concept about time is more flexible, it's very fluid. But you can even observe that in Southern European countries. So they take a siesta at a lunch break in France, Spain, Italy, and then whatever happens. So yeah, it's more flexible. Yeah, so it's really to understand. Yeah, first name it, and then have an open mind to learn, and then work with the others to come up with a compromise solution. Yeah, these are some general principles you can go about.
That's an interesting point that you were making that reminded me of another conversation I had with someone else recently, where we were talking about the topic of negotiation. And in the topic of negotiation, one of the things that you have to keep in mind is when you walk into a negotiation, if you want to actually walk out with some kind of agreement with another person that is mutually satisfying. So you don't end up with a loser and a winner, but you actually end up with a negotiated agreement that works and gets you both something that you want. You have to be ready to take one position that maybe they have and adding something else to it and coming up to that compromise, for lack of a better word, understanding of how you're going to operate so that you can blend together these two needs and come up with something that works for both of you, rather than taking the position of one of the culture groups trying to establish itself as the supreme way of behavior and then forcing compliance from all the others. It comes down to understanding what the different groups are and then coming up with a way that works for this new blended group now that has elements of the multiple cultures, as opposed to standing ground on, no, this is the right way, and any deviation from that is wrong. And I think that's what leads to a lot of the divisions that we have these days, is that there is that position of this is the right way and everything other than this is wrong, as opposed to we need to get something done together. So let's come up with a way of working together that respects various elements of who we are in our various cultures. Okay, so let's pause here and take stock of what we've learned from the first half of our discussion with Lulu. 1, culture barriers exist all around us in the 21st century. In addition to the usual challenges, there are shrinking barriers between people working together from different countries. There's diversity within our own countries and regional differences that also add up to cultural challenges. 2, despite these many cultural barrier-inducing conditions, most organizations today lack cross-cultural management training. So this is definitely an area of need that you and your ERG can help to fill. 3, the key to developing cross-cultural intelligence is to understand both your own culture and the culture of others. And the reason why we need a detached understanding of our own culture is because to work effectively across cultures, we need to understand our own thinking constructs and triggers, recognize our own cultural biases, and the fact that there are other ways of doing things that are no better or worse than our own. We all need to avoid assuming that our culture is superior or the best way to do things. While our society may be full of artifacts and signals that some cultures are superior to others, at a human level, we are all guilty of believing we are right and others are wrong. This is true of everyone, including people in non-dominant cultures. 4, when we seek to build the bridge between cultures, we need to seek compromise and work openly with others to find solutions. We literally need to build a hybrid culture for that hybrid team. Making others completely conform to our way of thinking is a big non-starter. Another way of saying this in DEI lingo is that if we want to be welcome, valued, and heard, we have to start to be welcoming, valuing, and hearing of everyone else. And finally, 5, one technique Lulu recommends during the initial stages of creating a hybrid approach for a team that comes from more than one cultural background is explicitly naming cultural differences and focusing on them to become more aware and to enable us to consciously negotiate functional solutions. In the next segment of our discussion with Lulu, we will explore how you can use what we've learned so far to expand your ERG's influence by building allies and supporters. All this and more when we come back, but first this. I'll see you on the other side. Are you an ERG group or committee chair struggling to balance your ERG activities with your day job responsibilities? Well, you're not alone. There are hundreds of thousands of passionate ERG leads all around the world that find themselves in the same boat. The only solution found by many is to give up lunch hours and personal time with family and friends. But there is a better way, and that better way is to master the powerful skills that enable enable you to 1. Set realistic and achievable compelling goals and priorities. 2. Distribute the workload by effectively delegating tasks and responsibilities to others. 3. Communicate in a way that increases your impact with less time and effort on your part. 4. Secure the full and active support of executive sponsors and other senior business leaders. And 5. Fit your ERG leadership work into a reasonable set of time boundaries. And that and more is exactly what tens of thousands of your colleagues have learned to do effortlessly by participating in Supercharge Workshops. Supercharge Workshops was developed by us along the same easy and powerful how-to framework found in our popular Supercharge Your ERG's book. The modular, customizable programs are loaded with fun exercises and tools that will immediately give you back hours of time each day while increasing your ability to achieve high impact and measurable results in both your ERG work and your job. For more details on how you can schedule a Supercharge Workshop session in your organization, go to superchargeworkshops.com. That's https:// Supercharge Workshops, one word with no spaces.com. So don't suffer silently. Take that first step towards stopping your struggle today. Check out Supercharge Workshops. Lulu, what are some of the things that you ask people to do or to read so that they can become more familiar with different cultural cues and learn how to build trust with other people? Because I think that's one of the things that you talked about before that I want to underscore, because it's really important. And that is that to work effectively as a team and to work effectively within an organization with different people, you have to build trust with those different people. And trust is built in different ways in different cultures. What are some of the things that you encourage people to do to learn how to build trust across different cultures?
I think in general, obviously, it's that you need to do your homework. So, but doing your homework from a point of view is not as a tourist. So before you start working a different culture or with a different cultural groups, do some study, do some research online. But not to look for which bar has the best beer. To understand, what are the philosophy or thought pattern and how they deal with time, how they deal with the money. It's actually, do some homework. And then when you are in the situ, and just ask people if you can find some kind of so-called cultural interpreter for you, and ask people to help you, ask questions. But I would advise not to ask just one person, because in any culture, if you ask one person's opinion, it can be incomplete, to say the least. So if you can ask several people, why do you do this? Then you get a fuller picture, if you like, because that's a term called a triangulation. So you can do that, get a fuller picture. The third thing I would say is, I think to always act more cautiously than you would normally do in your home country, if you like. And there's loads of books. The problem with the books is you read the books, it all makes sense when you read it. But then when you come to walk into the office, walk into your factory, and all of a sudden, you don't know where do those things hang into your day-to-day routine. So that can be quite a challenge. So it does require a very conscious mind to constantly have that the voice, if you like, to actually, what is the cultural aspect in this issue? Like, for example, financial management, which is very big for company. I call that financial management or financial mismanagement. in a company. A few quick examples, like the use of company cars, for example, in the more cost-oriented country, European, America, company car is meant for business. But if you open a factory in India, in any of the African countries, or in, a company car can be used by bosses to drop the kids off, pick up the wife, and do a bit of shopping. So it's all become part of the company car. So how do you prevent that? And then you have your logoed merchandise, right? So over the cap, T-shirt, everything. And it's meant for the employee to wear at the workplace. And before you know it, sometimes all the relatives are wearing that. How do you manage that? Or even though the whole village is wearing the logoed merchandise, how do you manage that? These are very practical issues, and also the embezzlement. So I want to really highlight this issue for companies. The financial management, very key. So the embezzlement of money, misuse of funds, is hitting every company, including my organization. That is because there's a cultural difference. For European culture, it's largely derived from this Christianity. It's called guilt culture. So you have a very clear line of right and wrong, black and white. So it's embezzle $1 is embezzlement, and $10 is also embezzlement. But there's another group of culture called the shame culture, which is entirely different. The shame culture is all to do about how the group view your behavior. So under the acceptable level of that kind of culture is fluid. So I remember when I grew up in China, all the guys who caught embezzling money on the telly, on the news, being sentenced, the general comments from the crowd is that, this person got so greedy. Meaning, if the person didn't take too much, it's okay. So, and that is still the same today. So then that means for companies operating, so you don't know how much they are taking, then where's the line? So these are very practical questions when it comes to cultural issue, and it can really affect your company's performance and reputation, if you like.
And of course, for organizations that operate on a global scale, that presents some interesting challenges in terms of maintaining some kind of uniform ethical behavior across their different areas where they operate. So I'm going to take you now into resource groups directly in terms of what are some of the challenges that a leader of an intact resource community might face when they try to introduce people from other backgrounds into their groups? Because let's face it, if all you do is just preach to other people who are like you and who already believe what you believe and you celebrate together, that's nice and that's reaffirming, but you're not growing your influence. You're not impacting other people in the organization. You're not spreading a new way of thinking to other people in the organization. The way you do that is by bringing other people in and having them as allies and supporters. So it's an important thing for these groups to do, but there are some challenges associated with it as well. Because if you've got a group that, let's say, for example, is a group that is for Latinx or Hispanics, and that group has only members that come from various countries that are in, let's say, South America or are descendants of those countries, and now they want to bring in people that are not of that background, that's going to present some interesting challenges. What are some of the challenges that you foresee in that? And maybe we could talk a little bit about how do you head that off? What do you do to prepare yourself so that you are ready to take on those allies?
So the best thing to do is to actually present yourself at a human level, meaning to connect to them, for them to see you as allies, to try to connect them at a human level, and then for them to see you as human. That's quite helpful to build that trust.
one of the things that I would take that as meaning is that if you've got, let's say, a resource group that's for women, or a resource group that's for Asians, or a resource group that's for African Americans, you want to first establish relationships between them, yourself, and other members of the group at the human level. And that means that probably the best event is some kind of event that promotes social bonding or general getting to know you communication, as opposed to the formal presentation with slides and so forth.
I just give you a quick example how we can do that. I think it needs to be an ongoing process, not just like at the beginning. It needs to be an ongoing process. Like you said, less formal and more real way is quite good. A few things you could do is like celebrate each other's festival, the cultural festival. And the other is to say, bring and share with your meal, but has to be not from McDonald's, not from Burger King. Bring your traditional meal. You have to bring it in and explain why you eat that dish, what is in there, any cultural meaning attached to that. You can also do things like wear your traditional clothes to work. Because when I remember, and then people can ask, the question, why do you, any meaning with this? So that's so many ways you can do to create the ongoing curiosity and awareness of each other, because that's also a way to bring them down to the connecting at a human level, because at the core, we all do kind of similar thing, but in a different way.
You know, there's an interesting thing that you added to something that I know a lot of organizations do. A lot of organizations do have these meals, or everybody in the cafeteria is going to get together on a particular day because they're celebrating some particular cultural group, and they're going to have meals from that particular culture. That's great. That gives a point of bringing people together. What you added to it that I thought was really good is this idea of explaining, why is this meal important? What is the significance of it to you and your culture? Where did it come from exactly? Why did you choose to put those ingredients together? Is there a larger significance to it? And I think that when you get to the point where you start talking about that, that's when you begin to connect with other people, because even though they may not connect in the way that you're connecting around that particular meal, as humans, we all connect with each other around certain things that connect us in similar ways. So we all connect with family, but maybe one group does it over a certain meal, another group does it over a certain type of get together, but they all understand that connection piece. As you were saying before, that human connection piece, they just may not use the same vehicle to get there. And by you explaining how this is a vehicle toward that kind of connection, it gives it a greater depth than just enjoying Mexican food or a dish that comes from China. It gives it more depth in terms of the meaning of it to that particular person. And usually in that meaning, that's where the connection lies. So I think that I wanted to underline that, because I think that that's something that's really important not to ignore. Two quick last questions for you. What resources do you offer or recommend that will enable our listeners to continue building their cross-cultural muscles, as it were? And how can people reach you?
Right. There are good resources around. I think two particular books I would actually recommend. Actually, three I would like to show you, if I may. One of them is quite well written by a lady called Erin Meyer. It's called Cultural Map. So the Cultural Map. So that's, you probably might have heard about it. Another person wrote this one called The Bridge the Cultural Gaps by Gibson. So this is a more newer edition. So again, they all tackle it from different angle, but addressing the issue how to work cross-culturally. And you have an American lady who wrote this one called Lainey Lanslow, the World Wise. So yeah, so this is also a good read. But again, the challenge always being, you can see that there are a lot of pages. By the time you you went through them, it can end up all muddled in your head. And then it's like learning to drive. So you learn all the theory, right? And then when you get into the car and you still look at the cockpit, you think, okay, stick, light, petrol, gas. So it's about how you take it from the conscious level to the subconscious level.
Excellent. And where can we reach you?
I have obviously you can reach me on LinkedIn, just spell, type in my name, Liu. And now you know how I look like, because there are similar names on LinkedIn. And I have a website called luiluicoaching.com as well. So I have a specially designed program for managers. So yeah, you can reach me on that one. Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, Lulu, thank you again for joining us today on ERG Power Talk. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Likewise, I really enjoyed talking to you.
So let's look at what we got out of the second segment of our discussion with Lulu. One, while having the group to connect with others who are like us is supportive and reaffirming, the only way that we can build influence and gain greater support for our communities is to branch out to allies and supporters who are not like us, people who come from the many other cultures and backgrounds all around us. Two, to prepare to welcome and work with people from other cultures. Do research. Read about the other cultures. Ask people from other cultural groups about how they think about various major topics that might be the key to you engaging and working with them. So, for an ERG community, these might include exploring topics like, what do you think about ERGs and groups for, say, women or Latinx people? Do you see them as a negative? And if so, why? Or do you see them as a positive? And again, why? Listening for underlying beliefs that drive the judgment of others and comparing it to our beliefs that drive our judgments is the beginning of building that understanding. 3, to bring allies and supporters into your group, seek to first create opportunities to introduce yourself and to get to know them at a human level. Lulu talks about sharing meals from each other's cultures and explaining the significance and origin of those meals, or inviting others to come to our events wearing clothing that comes from some aspect of their culture, and you doing the same and then explaining how these garments came to be significant and useful to your community. 4, remember that while we may not all use the same vehicles to establish our human connections, we all share similar types of connections: love of friends and family, a desire for fairness. As we grow to understand the cultural artifacts and vehicles used by others for these common connections, we deepen our understanding and our differences begin to diminish. 5, some great books that Lulu recommended for people who want to build their cultural intelligence and communication muscle that bear repeating include the following: The Culture Map by Aaron Meyer, published in May 2014. Another one is Bridge the Culture Gap by Robert Gibson, published in March 2022. And Worldwise by Lainey Denslow, published in November 2005. And finally, 6, one thing to remember as you embark on this culture bridging journey is give yourself time. As Lulu pointed out, we can consciously learn material by reading and talking to others, but it takes time to internalize what we've learned into our subconscious and automatic behaviors. Intact supportive communities like ERG are a valuable tool in providing support to their community members. But when they connect across groups and with the entire organization, that's when the real magic happens. Why? Because as we all know, teams of diverse people can accomplish a lot more than homogeneous ones. But this is only true when people from different backgrounds build a bridge that brings them together. One example of a team of people from different cultures learning to bridge their cultural differences and achieving success in recent history is the story of the Solar Decathlon team from Virginia Tech. The Solar Decathlon was an international competition that challenged collegiate teams to design and build energy-efficient solar-powered homes. In 2010, Virginia Tech assembled a team of students and faculty members from diverse backgrounds to compete in the effort. The team included members from the United States, China, Germany, and other countries. This cross-cultural team initially faced many challenges in learning to work together effectively. One of the key challenges the team faced was communication. The team members had different cultural backgrounds and spoke different languages, which made it difficult to collaborate effectively. The team leaders recognized the importance of building trust, building understanding among the team members as a foundation for bridging those cultural differences. So to that end, the team worked to create opportunities for team members to learn about each other's cultures and human values. They organized team building exercises, language exchange programs, and cultural exchange events that enabled the team members to experience and understand each other's cultures. As a result, team members started to trust and later understand each other's perspectives and develop a sense of camaraderie. The effort paid off in the competition. The solar-powered home design Virginia Tech came up with was a unique combination of American, European, and Chinese architecture and energy systems, and it received high marks for its innovation and efficiency. Like the Virginia Tech team, you can start your bridge building outreach by creating opportunities for people in your communities and others outside the community to get to know and connect with each other at a human level. Be open to teaching and be open to understanding. Find that precious unifying ground, and step by step, your ability to influence your organization toward greater inclusion will grow. Thank you for tuning in to ERG PowerTalk. If you enjoyed and got value out of this program, please like us and leave a favorable review at your podcast provider's site. Also, invite others to listen to the show. By the way, contact me if you're looking for an ERG Symposium keynote or a leader for your strategy workshop, new chair onboarding, and or ERG bootcamp. I can run these for you either in person or in a virtual setting. Also, for more great ideas and tips for your ERGs, get my books, Supercharge Your ERGs, 18 Tips to Power Up Your ERG/BRG Strategy, and the new DEI and ERG Frontier, how you and your efforts can rise and thrive in the new world of constant disruption. Both available on Amazon.com. I'm Joe Santana. Thanks again for tuning in.